The house with no end. I've always been fascinated by urban exploration. Abandoned buildings, forgotten tunnels, crumbling factories. They all have a story to tell. Layers of history hidden beneath peeling paint and rusted metal. It's not the adrenaline of trespassing that draws me, but the thrill of discovery, of glimpsing the remnants of lives once lived. So when my friend Mark sent me a message about a house that can't be mapped, I knew I had to check it out. The house wasn't in the city or even in the suburbs. It stood alone at the edge of a vast, empty field on the outskirts of town, surrounded by a sparse forest that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. It wasn't on any map, digital or otherwise, but Mark swore he'd stumbled across it while exploring the area. People say it's weird, Mark had said. Like, yeah, it doesn't make sense inside. Walls don't line up, rooms change, that kind of thing. I'd heard stories like this before. Urban legends that usually led to disappointing, run-of-the-mill abandoned houses. But something about Mark's tone, the way he refused to go back there himself, intrigued me. So on a cloudy Saturday morning, I packed my camera, flashlight, and notebook and set out to find the house. The first thing I noticed when I arrived was how out of place it looked. The house was large, Victorian in style, with high gables and tall windows. Its white paint faded to a sickly gray. The field around it was overgrown with tall grass and weeds, and the tree line behind it seemed to lean inward, as if the forest itself was trying to swallow the structure. There was no driveway, no signs of past inhabitants. It was just there. I approached cautiously, the crunch of gravel under my boots the only sound in the still air. The front door was ajar, creaking slightly in the breeze. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior was what I expected. Layers of dust, cobwebs, and the faint sour smell of decay. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, the patterns faded and unrecognizable. Furniture was scattered here and there. An overturned chair, a broken table, a faded rug. It was eerily quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I started exploring, moving room by room, taking photos and jotting down notes. At first it seemed like a typical abandoned house. The kitchen was empty except for a rusted stove and a sink filled with dirt. The living room had an old piano with broken keys. A staircase in the foyer led to the second floor, its banister cracked but intact. But then I began to notice the oddities. The first was the hallway on the second floor. It seemed impossibly long, stretching far beyond what the exterior dimensions of the house should allow. Doors lined both sides, evenly spaced, but when I opened them, most led to empty, windowless rooms. A few opened to brick walls, as though the spaces behind them had been sealed off. One door opened to nothing at all, just an empty void, black and infinite. I slammed it shut and moved on. The second was the stairs. I thought I'd explored the second floor thoroughly, but when I turned a corner, I found another staircase, this one narrower and steeper than the first. It led to a third floor I hadn't seen from outside. I climbed it hesitantly, the air growing colder with each step. My flashlight flickered, casting long, jittery shadows on the walls. The third floor was wrong. The layout didn't make sense. Hallways twisted and turned at impossible angles, some sloping upward, others downward. The rooms were larger than they should have been, their proportions warped, as if the house was stretching itself. One room had a ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. Another had walls covered in mirrors, each reflecting not just me but other things. Shadows that shouldn't have been there. As I moved deeper into the house, time began to lose meaning. My watch stopped working, and the light from the windows grew dim, though it was still midday. The air was heavy, oppressive, making it harder to breathe. My footsteps echoed strangely, as though the house was larger inside than out. I tried to retrace my steps, to find the staircase and leave, but the more I tried, the more I realized I was lost. The house wasn't just big, it was endless. I began to panic. My flashlight flickered again, its beam growing weaker. I stumbled into a room with no doors, just 4 blank walls. When I turned around, the hallway I'd entered from was gone. I was trapped. And then I heard it. A sound faint at first, like distant whispers. It grew louder, closer until it was all around me. Voices overlapping, speaking words I couldn't understand. The walls seemed to tremble, the floor shifting beneath my feet. I backed into a corner, clutching my flashlight like a weapon, and scanned the room. In the far corner, something moved. It was subtle, a ripple in the shadows. But as I stared, it began to take shape. A figure, tall and angular, stepped forward, its form half hidden in the dim light. Its face was wrong, too long, its features stretched and twisted. Its eyes, or where its eyes should have been, glowed faintly like embers. I don't remember what happened next. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was lying in the field outside the house. The sky above me, dark and starless. My camera and flashlight were gone, but my notebook was still in my pocket, its pages smeared with dirt and something darker. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I haven't told anyone what happened, not even Mark, but every night since, I've dreamed of the house. In the dreams, I'm back inside, wandering its endless halls, the whispers growing louder with each step. And sometimes when I wake, I swear I can still hear them.